Excited to welcome Queen's University head coach Grant Leonard to the basketball podcast. Leonard was hired by then Division II Queens as an assistant coach in 2013 and promoted to associate head coach in 2016. Over 7 years as an assistant coach, the team achieved a winning percentage of 83% with a 189-37 overall record, consistently ranking in the top 25, including a number one ranking. He was promoted to head coach for the 2022-23 season, Queens' first season in NCAA Division I. In his first season, Queens went 18-15 with a 7-11 record in the Atlantic Sun Conference. Last year, his team reached the Atlantic Sun Tournament Quarterfinals for the second straight season after defeating Florida Gulf Coast in the opening round. Last year at Queens, he spearheaded an offense that was ranked top 5 in the nation in tempo, according to KenPom. Leonard began his coaching career as an assistant at Shorewood High School, and then he was an assistant coach at Washington College before becoming director of basketball operations for Texas Pan American. He was also an assistant coach for the Flagler Saints and the Payne Lions. Grant, welcome to the basketball podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So maybe let's start with the transition. You took over at a very unique time when the program transitioned from Division II to Division I, and obviously you're a part of a very successful program as a Division II program, but maybe talk to us about that first part, that transition.
Yeah, really unique transition overall. Obviously, going from assistant coach to head coach, associate head coach, however you want to call it, to head coach, to from Division II to Division I. I think it's the only time that transition's ever been done, which it's been phenomenal. And then our team was so unique because we were 30-4, and we returned guys 2 through 10, and our top player transferred to Murray State. So we kept the same team intact from Division II to Division I and found a way to win 18 games that first year. And a testament to our guys and their basketball IQ, because we were actually 362 out of 363 in size that year and 363 in Division I experience. Really unique team that really just, they battled, and we had a couple of really good players and were able to figure some stuff out.
It was an outstanding transition, and I've coached against all levels of American schools, from Division III, NAIA, all the way up to Division I, and there's really good programs at all levels of basketball. But talk to us a little bit about the difference. You mentioned the size. Was there anything else that seemed different?
I think the positional size, it's not even just because people, when they hear size, they think about your big guys, okay? And the big guys were definitely different, but the positional size, Division II, we were average size. Division I, we were obviously small. We were tiny, but it was at every position we gave up a couple inches in height and length. And then the depth inside, the amount of bigs, and that really hurt us the first season. We had an injury or two that really, we had a lot of steam going in early in the season. I think we started off 10-3, and some injuries wore us down. And I think that was because of the depth of rosters and the size consistently. It hurt us as the season progressed.
And it makes sense. And obviously, you've been able to keep some success going throughout this transition, and really haven't taken that big a step backwards in terms of your transition at the Division I level. And a lot of that has to do with the offense and the offensive philosophy. So maybe before we get too deep into it, just outline for us a little bit the offensive philosophy.
That's one other thing. I think that the difference between Division I and Division II is our pace was better than most teams. And this past year, we were 10th in the country in pace. But that's not really, in my opinion, the most important thing in the offense. I think spacing is the first priority, and then it goes from spacing to pace as the second priority. Now, pace isn't always about how fast you get a shot off. Our average possession length was 15.1 seconds, which is pretty fast. But it's the pace of which you get down the floor. It's the pace of which you get into the first action. It's the pace of your cuts. It's the pace of your separation to screen. And all of that creates a tempo that becomes difficult to guard. And I think that spacing is your number one priority, because if you have great pace but run into each other, it doesn't go well, because you don't want bodies on top of bodies. So space is number one priority. Pace is the second priority.
We'll dive deeper into both of those, but I'm curious, is that a conscious thing? Are you telling your players you want to play with pace, or is it a byproduct of all the things that you're doing?
It's both, and I constantly and talking I usually in game am yelling pace, and that doesn't necessarily mean we want to shoot fast, but it just is the speed of which we're getting into things. And so our goal is to get in that first action within 4 seconds, and we got to get the ball up the floor. I always say that we run offense for each other. So the first thing you have to do is run the floor for each other. You're not always going to get the ball, but you got to get to the corners. If the guy in the middle is staying in the middle, then he's got to get underneath the defense. And then we've got to create gaps early in the possession so that we can create advantages.
I love that team behavior that you're emphasizing through that phrasing of we run offense for each other. And that's just a simple thing for your players to be able to keep coming back to. Can you explain that a little bit deeper, how you bring that to life for your players?
Yeah, we actually have a chart that we give them after every game, and it's called For Each Other chart. And it tracks how many times you run the floor at a great pace and don't get the ball. If you cut and get a cut assist, so say the ball gets reversed to the top of the key and you're on the wing and you cut and create the corner guy to become open, that's a cut assist. And then we have screen assist. If you set a great screen and get a guy open, that's a screen assist. And then we track paint touches, and we always say we get paint touches for each other. And all of those things get charted every game. And we're trying to find guys that are not affecting necessarily the stat sheet, but really are in other ways. And we have one or two guys on our team that really crush it in that for each other area. And I always tell them, like, you got to take those guys out to lunch because they're doing big things for you. But it leads to our main rule of offense. And our entire goal is to get two guys on the ball or two guys guarding one guy. And you can do that a lot of different ways: post-ups, cuts, ball screens, handoffs. And once you get two guys guarding one guy, we've created an advantage, and then we got to keep that advantage. And the entire goal of our offense after getting two on the ball is to get a wide open shot versus a shot over a body. And those are the things we preach to our guys every single day, and we try and show our guys on film, and it really leads to a healthy offense.
Love it. I love it. And screen assist, cut assist, acknowledging things that other people might not notice, but that are so important to your team. I just love that power of that. And then you mentioned, let's start with spacing, because that was the first thing you mentioned. How are we developing spacing? I get asked this all the time from coaches. How do you build spacing? How do you develop spacing?
The first thing is, the most important thing is the two wings got to run to the corners. And I always tell our guys, like, hey, you have dreams or aspirations to play professional, hopefully the NBA, but the highest level possible. And the first thing every pro coach can tell you is get your butt to the corner. And then from there, the philosophies then change, okay? And what we allow our guys is to have a lot of options. So sometimes we have a rim runner, and there's nothing wrong with having a rim runner. But like North Carolina, they have a rim runner every play. We might not. So if a guy is in the middle of the floor, it can be a guard or a big, he's going to run straight to the rim. If he doesn't get the ball and he doesn't bury that first body, then he's going to get out. Out can be to the short corner. It can be all the way out to the corner, either way. But if he's not in front of the ball in the middle of the floor, then we're going to run to 5-out principles, and then quite often run into drags or step-ups. But it could be a lot of different actions we get into from that point. But those two guys get into the corners, and that guy in the middle of the floor have to get underneath the defense, and that flattens it out and creates gaps early in the offense. And those are the most important things to spacing.
I love that you don't get hung up on whether we're 4-out or 5-out. Changing the spacing is beautiful all the time. It makes it more adaptable. And I say that to coaches all the time. Don't just get hung up on one thing. It can be both. It can be anything as long as it represents space. Talk to us then about pace. You mentioned that getting it over in under 4 seconds, that's the goal. So talk to us. What does that actually mean? And then how are you developing that?
So we actually only have, it sounds simple, but we only have 12 actions in our offense. And now there's a couple of little wrinkles here and there, but it's really a 12 basic principles. And so the most common principle in any offense is a drag, okay? And so if we're going to get into a drag, and I don't ever want to do a drag versus set defense, we want to do drags versus floors that are transitioning, whether it's a drag or a double drag or a step up. But we want to get into that action before the defense sets. And the defense sets usually around 5 or 6 seconds. So our goal is to get to that first action in operational within 4 seconds before they set, because then it's going to create the advantage faster. It doesn't mean we're going to score off of it, but it's going to hopefully cause, again, whether the screener rolls or pops and there's a cut or whatever the action dictates, it's going to hopefully cause the non-set defense to have a gap or over-rotate early. And then, again, we're going to get an advantage and then try and keep that advantage.
Love it. And you referenced the corners. I know one of the challenges for coaches is when players should pass to the dead corner and when they should not, for advantage versus not advantage. I know that's a key part. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and we do have a couple things that go to the dead corner. The first is a dribble handoff to the dead corner, and we'll call this the ball talk. So none of this while live play is going on, I call. It's all dictated by the players and where the ball goes. So if they dribble to the dead corner, it's a dribble handoff into a ball screen. Very simple action, and it's very easy to remember. If they throw it to the dead corner, that guy has to Barkley drive. He has to try and cause a defender to bluff at him. It can't just sit in the dead corner because at that point your offense is going to stall. And so those are the two things there that go to the dead corner for us. But we oftentimes, if the guy doesn't get to the dead corner, which happens, sometimes he's running alongside the point guard. The point guard's doing a good job of pushing pace. We will run button hook that guy right into a pistol action. And again, it's a read that our players make. It's not called, but it's really hard to guard as the floor is not set. And we have got, last year, we probably got 15 dunks just off that action alone.
Love it. And to clarify for coaches that maybe not know the Barkley term, turn a drive into a post-up type of idea.
That's correct.
Okay. And then I love that idea because this always happens in transition. You don't always get it perfect. So you don't always get to that dead corner before the ball's over half, for example. So in that case, then you're triggering basically that player to be able to loop back into a pistols action.
That's correct.
That's awesome.
The biggest key for that is to get off the sideline because you don't want to be on the sideline. But if you can button hook that into a decent space, it creates early action. It's really hard to guard. And a lot of teams, because they don't know what we're running when, they'll just switch it. And then we'll slip a lot of those actions, whether it's the flare or the ball screen, we'll just slip it.
You referenced the 12 actions. We don't have to go through all of them, but more or less, I think what you need to paint the picture for, if you could, is how you develop them, because you mentioned this being very conceptual, which is awesome. So how do they know what to run, when to run, and then how are you developing these actions?
And so it all has to work for your personnel, and any action can work. And again, if we reverse through the trail, it would be one action, and that's usually a stagger away. If we dribble handoff to the trail, it's another action, which the NBA calls ho. We don't call, I don't want to stand up and say ho in a game. So I call it something else. But that's a Fred Hoiberg, Brad Stevens action where it ends up a vertical step up. And then there's other screen away actions, which our point guard can dictate on his own if he sees an advantage or a guy that he wants to get a shot or an early action for. And I always say those early screen away actions very rarely end up in shots. What they end up is in curls or slips that get two on the ball, and it creates an advantage for the screener most often. And so I always tell guys the most important guy on the floor is usually the guy in the middle of the floor, the trailer, because he's going to dictate a lot of what we do. And so this year, one of our better players is a two guard who's a catch and shoot guy. And so a lot of our actions this year are dictated off screenaways. So staggers for him, baseline running staggers for him, pinaways. And again, the defense is going to react to him, which is going to cause other guys to get advantages, which will create advantages that will lead to us getting what we want.
Love it. Can you describe the whole action just a little bit more for coaches at home?
Yeah, so it's a dribble handoff to the trail. Then he will, as he's coming in to get the point guard, he will go to the strong side corner. The point guard will then get open in the opposite slot. And then the big that's opposite will lift instead of vertical step up screen. And there's so many different wrinkles out of it. You can throw directly to the post and get a handoff. And then you can pop and you can 45 cut or burn cut on the backside, or you can roll and double shake off the fence where the ball came from. And so there's a lot of different looks out of one play. And again, all of them for us are reads. And so our guys just really just learn how to play off each other and understand what spacing we're trying to get to.
I don't blame you for not wanting to shout that out loud in game situations. But look, you're painting this picture. Pace gets you over quickly into actions or into attack mode. And then you're trying to maintain the defense and scramble to maintain your advantage by flowing quickly into actions. And the really key part of this, which having watched some of your film, you guys do an outstanding job of being lag free. From getting over half to getting into actions. That's the key part of pace, isn't it? To be able to flow quickly into actions. How are you developing that?
So it's really just, and again, everything we do is conceptual. So it's very rarely called by me, but we want it to be seamless. So what we always try and tell our guys, when guys first get here, they want to grab the ball, pull it out, and call for something. All right. And that is the exact opposite of what we're trying to do. So we are trying to get to the next concept. And the next concept could be anything. Okay. And I always say the more random, the better. So every once in a while, you'll see a random stagger. They sometimes know the first stagger's coming, but it's the second one or a random zoom, which is really hard to guard. When you know zoom's coming, you can guard it because you'll have the concepts that you're doing defensively. But when it's random, it never really goes well for the defense. And so for our guys, it's get to the second and the third concept. And American players are taught so much to dribble. And so we get into sometimes a little too much what I call dribble diarrhea and trying to get guys to go screen away more and to get to other concepts that are tougher to guard. And then even on our screenaways, I'm constantly trying to teach our guys, let's straight cut less and beg for the ball. Let's slip, let's curl, let's reject more and cause the defense confusion.
So you are encouraging them to actively be variable in what they do off of actions. And I think that's really important, especially early on. I'm curious your opinion on this. It's not as much of a read early as much it is just do something different so you get used to doing something different, isn't it?
Correct. And then once you learn that how powerful a reject of a screen can be, and then a pop back into a handoff for the screener, and then they start to realize like, man, it's easier for me to get in the paint and I have less bodies to deal with. But the randomness of everything that we do makes it hard to scout. And for me, I think really good defenses, they're so well scouted. They're calling out every play and every action. And so my goal is to make it so that they can't do that because then we're a lot harder to guard. And I think we've been able to do that our first 2 years here in Division I. And I think I'm getting better at teaching it and we're getting better at installing it. This year, we're way far ahead of where we were in years past. But I think it's just because we're learning how to do it better.
Yeah, it's awesome. And dribble diarrhea, everyone in the world will be using that term now with their players. So that's beautiful. Coach, take us deeper into terms of then how you do teach it. Because to me, like a lot of what you're describing is basically coming down to 3 and 2 player actions at some point. It's a collective, but then they come down to these actions. So it's easy to break them down. But the danger in breaking them down is that you don't empower as much those other players that are holding space, creating space, as you said, cutting for space. So can you talk to us about how you bring it all together?
Yeah, so honestly, we start each day to warm up when they're fresh and we get into concepts. And today, for instance, we did ball screen concepts. All we did is set ball screens, and I always say the defense is going to guard it one of 4 ways. The first way is aggressive, which could be a trap or a hedge. The second way is passive, which is drop. The third way is a switch, and the fourth way is an ice. So these 4 concepts, we want to teach our guys how to read the concept and then just make the right decision out of each concept, which again will create an advantage. The point of a ball screen is to get 2 on the ball. All right. When you have 2 on the ball, you should pass it. And it's hard to get some players to understand that. I always say if you want to score off a ball screen, you should reject it. Okay. So what we do is we spend about 3 or 4 minutes on each way a team guards a ball screen, and we just work on those concepts of how to get it out. And then we put guys in other spots to get passes because I think great defenses are going to stop the first pass. So we may get it out to the roll, but they're going to help. And so at that point, we got to get the ball out to the corner, where the low man tags or when the high man tags, we get it out to the shake. All these concepts again. And then, so that's how we do ball screens because we set a lot of them.
Is that
Then
against defense, against guided defense, against each other? What is that?
our coaches actually do it.
Yeah.
We put our coaches in those concepts defensively. And so we always have 3 guys in the concept, 2 guys guarding the ball and 1 guy tagging. And we're trying to teach our guys the first layer of becoming a great college player is learning to read the coverage. The second layer is manipulating the tag, okay, or understanding where the tag is coming from. And then great players can manipulate the tag. And that's really hard to do in college, but it does exist. And we got 1 guy who's starting to progress to that now, which I'm really excited to see, where he can actually lock eyes with the tag wherever it is and move him to get the ball where he wants.
You mentioned lock eyes. What are some other ways we can manipulate the tag?
With cuts on the backside. And so when that guy who's tagging is, again, he's staring at the ball or the ball handler, that's when cuts can happen and can really manipulate the backside of the defense. So the guy coming off the ball screen can lock eyes with the tag and move them, but the backside cuts can also completely destroy tags if you do it the right way.
It makes sense. I was just going to say, I've heard people describe your offense as an NBA style offense, and it makes sense now after you explain it because it's basically, again, it's flowing into concepts, especially out of transition. Can you just paint the picture? So you're in these concepts. Are we continuously blending concepts together within the possession? And
That's
ideally, at no point we're pulling it out and running any action or set. Yeah.
No, that will never happen. But I will say, so the zoom and the pistol concepts and the stagger concepts, the most important thing is to, again, if it's not our ball screen read day, it's our action read day. And we start to work on those actions and what wrinkles can happen on those actions. So say we reject a stagger, then coming off the guy who is screening it, then comes off the single pin down. And then what that screener does every time when he sets the pin down, he looks for the slip, 2 steps down. If he's not there, then he's coming back into a vertical step up or get, and then we're playing from there. And again, it's just how fast we get to the next concept, the next action, which breaks the defense down. And I think that this group has a really willingness to pass, which makes it way harder to guard. And so our ball really right now is popping.
So you connect passing obviously to your motto that you said at the beginning, but also like these team behaviors become a part of who you are because of how you play and the style of play as well. And that willingness to share the ball and everyone getting to eat. But I'll even simplify it more for coaches. If you draw one, you score. And if you draw two, you pass. It's pretty simple and it's pretty obvious, isn't it?
When you say that, I say it to every recruit when they're here. I'm like, look, that's the only rule we have on offense. If 2 guys are guarding you, got to pass that thing. And today in film, I'm showing our guys, they drew a 7-footer who tried to block their shot. You tried to shoot over them, and you had 2 guys open on the backside. So you got to get that ball out. But it's constantly showing those guys like, this is the shot we want, not the shot over the guy. And our guys are really bought into it, but you still got to teach it, and you don't have to yell at them and scream at them, but you just got to show them and got to keep emphasizing it, and they're going to play with a great spirit then.
Easy to say, agreed. Not easy to teach. Even when one of the girls in my practice last night, she drew one, but then she ended up fading away on a layup on one. And you can do better. You can get a better shot even against one, and that's part of it. So maybe connect player development with that. For those concepts, how are you developing those penetration, reaction, decisions, and reads?
Yeah, and I think putting some coaches in those tags helps guys make those reads. And then I think more importantly, develop all of your skill development out of the concepts you want them to score. So if you want certain shots in a game, that's where your skill development needs to go. And so I always tell people, look at a guy's synergy, and if 40% of his shots are coming off spot up, and that's okay, then 40% of his skill development needs to be spot up. And you need to be in the areas where you want them to be. And so I always try and make sure that guys understand if we want to score out of these concepts, then we should do skill development out of these concepts as well. And then you got to live with those shots too. So if you have a good shooter and you have a concept like a handoff ball screen and they go under it, you have to be okay with them shooting that shot. Just make sure it's a practice shot. So something that you work on in skill development and that you're telling those guys that is a shot we want as a group.
It's such a challenge, I still think, for a lot of coaches to sacrifice intensity for perceptual and decision reps like you're describing, playing against the coaches, getting those reps. And can you just talk about that? Because no part of you sacrificing your players' intensity or effort or anything like that, but they are getting these perceptual reps that ultimately make them better in games.
Yeah, and it's still a game speed rep because the pace of their action is still game speed, and our coaches, and I'm very fortunate to have an awesome staff, and I have 6 guys that played college basketball at a high level. So very fortunate to have that. But that's our warm up, if that makes sense. And our guys know that skill development starts our day, but then from there, now we're going to compete. So I think that you can do the best of both worlds. If you have a 2-hour practice, and that's, I think, what most people try and get to, we're a little lighter than that because of our pace, but you should break your practice up into quarters. All right. 4 different segments. There's a skill development segment. There's an offensive execution segment. There's a defensive teaching execution segment. And then there's a competing against each other segment. And sometimes that defensive one can be a competing one too, in shell where you're competing. But I think, but that's where you're trying to get to certain concepts and learn how to guard that stuff. And you should have balance in your practice breakdown. So a quarter skill development, a quarter offensive execution, a quarter defensive, whether it's energy or execution, and then 5-on-5 playing. And I've definitely going to play more 5-on-5 this year than I ever have before. I think it's been hugely beneficial for our team.
Yeah, it just gives them the whole picture and helps connect it. And that's the task complexity you got to play with. So you got to figure it out. But I just love that idea. I think again, we can sacrifice some of these traditional drills, and I don't know if you do them or not, like the 3-man weaves and stuff like that are considered warm-up drills, to be able to do perceptual and decision reps like you're describing and get more benefit out of it because it's connecting things that transfer to the game.
I know a lot of coaches that have won a lot of games doing some of those drills. I've just gotten away from that. And I say that kids' attention spans are very different nowadays. And everything we do, we try and translate to the floor. And I'm just not so sure 3-man weave does or drills like that. I'm not saying we don't do anything like that, but we try and keep everything to build onto our system. So everything that we're trying to get to system-wise is what we're trying to work on. And defensively, we're trying to make sure our system is married to our offense. So if you're going to play fast, and again, I grew up in Wisconsin, so I'm a huge Wisconsin basketball fan. Tony Bennett, all those guys, Virginia, there is lots of different ways to skin a cat. They're going to play slower, nothing wrong with that. We're going to play faster. But your defense has to be married to how you play offense. And if we're going to play that way, we have to create some sort of turnover margin. So we're going to have to pressure the ball. And if you're going to play a 5-out system, you're probably going to have more guards. You don't want people to wear you out down low on the post. So you've got to keep the ball higher on the floor. So whatever your offensive system is, it has to match what you're doing defensively. And so just make sure that those concepts all get together.
Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned player development connecting to what they actually do in the games, which is obviously great. So talk to us maybe about defining some of those roles, especially within the offensive side of the ball. When do you establish those roles? Does it start early, or do you give them time to explore and see what's possible?
I think it starts first day. And first of all, I think every new player in a program, now you get some guys now with grad transfers that are a little more established, but you have real information to give them at that point. This is who you have proven to be. All right. So maybe they're trying to get somewhere else, but we got to talk about that. But for most freshmen or new players, it's, hey, these are the 2 traits that we were attracted to when we recruited you. Okay. Let's build from there. So let's start. If you're a catch and shoot guy, let's start with that. Okay. If you're a great cutter, let's find your cut spots and really focus on that. And build from there means have success in those areas, get in the rotation, get on the floor, have success. And then if you want to add to your game, I'm 100% cool with that. That can happen in season and out of season. But I think the most important thing is to just guys got to play to their strengths. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's guys that play for millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars per year that literally just roll to the rim but can create vertical spacing at the rim. And so if you can do that, you do not have to do things you can't do, because all you do is expose yourself in a bad way.
Talk to us about conceptual offense, particularly around what you describe, and giving up control, maybe advice to other coaches about this. You reference Wisconsin basketball, somewhat more understanding of what's going to happen in a possession versus what you're doing, which is essentially, I don't know what's going to happen, but something's good going to happen, hopefully, because we've coached that to happen.
So if guys are playing to their strengths, right, and you get guys to buy into that, like they're gonna do what they're really good at, it's gonna create high efficiency, because you're gonna teach guys like, hey, in this area you're over a point per possession, in this area you're not. So we're gonna stay away from this area and we're gonna try and do this more. But each guy has the different areas that they're efficient in, and so guys buy into it. And then, like I said, we work over time to get them more efficient in the areas that they're not, or we just totally cut them out, which some guys are open to. The best advice I was ever given to was Bart Lundy. And I worked for him for 9 years, and he's a close friend. I consider him family. And when I stayed here, instead of going back home to Milwaukee with him, his advice to me was like, hey, you have a really good team coming back, like really good players. Just let them play. So many new coaches want to overcoach and call everything and control everything and manipulate. He's like, just let those guys go. I probably took that to an extreme, and he jokes about it now, but it's worked out. Our point guard was so good that I was like, hey, man, I got to let him play. He actually fought me on it, the point guard did, because he wanted more things called. And I was like, hey, honestly, just go get a paint touch and good things will happen. And he had a great year, and we had a great year. But it was freeing for me to allow players to make those decisions. And then when the ball was dead, I could manipulate the game. So when the ball's knocked out of bounds, sideline out of bounds, baseline out of bounds, or a timeout, now we focus on executing different concepts that I'm going to draw up. And so it's been really, I've been able to focus in those areas and let our guys play in the others. And it's really, I think, helped all of our guys play better and freer.
Love it. I love it. And another challenge, having done conceptual offense as well, is deciding what to coach and what not to coach. Because sometimes we impose our view of what the decision should have been or what the action should have been, as opposed to letting them figure it out. And there's a blend and there's an art to that. So maybe talk a little bit from your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think film is a huge deal. And I always try and say our film is interactive. I like to show a play and then rewind it and then ask them what they're thinking. And I think that really allows guys, and when you ask, don't ask the whole room, ask the specific guy. Hey, this guy was in action. What did you see here? And then they can talk you through it. And a lot of times they understand what they did wrong. But it starts to build higher level learning, and it really helps their understanding of things. And so I think film is invaluable. Individual film is really important, one-on-one, but team film, teaching a classroom setting where you're really just trying to, and it's not about embarrassing guys, rewinding film and yelling at them. This is a time that you can be a teacher. And I think coaches are teachers. And how do you help build their understanding of what your system is and what you're trying to do goals wise as a team, and then what they need to do as they grow?
Yeah, we're absolutely teachers, and learning language is something that shines through when you talk as well, that you want them to be learners. You want them to be active participants in this. This isn't me from the top telling you all the time. You're actively involved in this.
And that's part of conceptual teaching, is having terminology that is your culture, your family terminology, and making sure that it's consistent through your program. So if you're going to call a wide pin down, like, you got to call it that every time. Okay. And whatever your terminology is, that's what it is. And the cool thing about teaching conceptual offense is it allows you to teach conceptual defense. So these are philosophies on defense. These are what we're trying to do when we're guarding these actions. This is what we're going to do. And it allows your guys in scouting to start to layer in their brain how to guard things, and also learn how teams are going to guard things to then learn how to attack it.
And the benefit is your defense is playing conceptually because they don't know what the offense is going to do, but also because you run these 12 actions, which ultimately is more than 12, I know, because of how it blends all together, that your team's getting reps every day on the randomness and variability that they're going to experience in a game. As much as you prepare and scout, right, there's always going to be things that you just got to figure out.
That's correct. And that's, again, it sometimes you worry as a coach, you're not sure where you're at. Are you just really good offensively, or are you bad defensively? And so you got to put baseline stuff in, philosophy stuff in before you start playing. But I implore you to play right away. First day we had practice this summer, we played, because I don't know what to fix until I watch where their habits are at. And then we could start building some drills into what we're trying to do, and then let them play again, and then see what's improving, and then seeing what we have to work on from there. And so it's fun to coach that way, I swear, because you don't have to worry about a play call every play. But I do think that some people think that my demeanor on the sideline is so passive because I'm not calling something or screaming something out every play.
I fought that throughout the podcast, the Hollywoodization of what coaching should look like versus the reality. You look at it like Joe Mazzulla is getting criticized for the way he's standing stoically on the sideline or something. And it's people just don't get, obviously, the power of what you do every day rather than just those 2 hours in a game.
I think the coaching, I tell our players this in recruiting all the time, I'm going to get after you in practice because we're going to teach these concepts and we're going to get to them both offensively and defensively. During the game, I'm not going to yell and scream at you. Like, the coaching has been done. Now my job is to get us organized, get the right guys in at the right times with the right matchups, and then during those timeouts and ATOs and dead balls to get to the ball to the right places. And so our staff is organized to help me do that and to get the information that I need to make those decisions. And they do an unbelievable job. And they all have a duty that helps us all get to that spot.
You reference this, and I just want to highlight this and maybe get you to talk about this, but you reference talk to your players about being more efficient, leading to them being more effective. And I find that nowadays in the modern coaching that a lot of the players, even the U13 players I'm coaching, they understand a little bit of analytics. So they understand when I'm talking about efficiency, I'm only trying to help you. I'm not telling you not to shoot. I'm not telling you not to drive. I'm telling you that there's better possibilities that make you more efficient. Talk to us a little bit about the use of analytics to be able to educate a player about how they can be better.
Yeah, I think it's a huge part in development. And you try to explain to them, look, in NBA GM, the first thing they're going to pull up is your synergy page. And they're going to see what your points per possession were. Okay. And if you're not in a range that they feel comfortable with, they just toss your resume out. Like it's not, it's like it doesn't even exist anymore. Okay. And every shot you take is basically a dot on your resume. Okay. And so your goal is to get to an area where you're the most efficient you can be and then to increase your volume. And if your team is playing with the right spirit for each other, you'll get the same amount of shots, but you'll just get better ones. The issue is, and I've heard Gino at UConn speak about this, one bad shot leads to someone else taking a bad one, and it becomes infectious because they're like, they took one, I need to take one. But if everyone plays with the right spirit, everyone will get great shots. And the same amount of shots will be taken by your leading scorer, whether they're good or bad shots. And so your goal is to get the most good shots you can as a team. And I think Nate Oates says it the best, like he tracks shot quality in game. And we're trying to get our program there where we can do that. But that's all we want is a quality shot each time.
And it just demonstrates how important it is to hold players accountable. And the hard part about coaching is that it's holding them accountable. The first time one of our players in practice last night shot a shot versus two, when they drew two, I stopped it. I brought them all in and I said, hey, listen, I understand the intent. You're trying to score. And we just nipped it in the bud right there. We never had another one the rest of the night. You just got to bring attention to it because they're not trying to do the wrong thing. They just sometimes don't realize that there's a better possibility, do they?
No, and I think sometimes they just don't know. I'm asking them to do things sometimes they've never been asked to before. So I'm asking them to read defenses and just make right decisions. A lot of them, they were the best player in their team, so they were asked to go score. And they were allowed to take shots over bodies, and they were allowed to take shots when two guys were guarding them. And so you can't ask them to do things that they've never done before and expect them to have it right away. It's just taking time to know each guy's background, each player's background, and figure out where their strengths are. And obviously, older, more experienced players, they've been taught more because they've played more. And so that's why college teams are going to older rosters, and that's a part of it. We have 4 freshmen, scholarship freshmen on this roster, and then a couple of them are going to have to play. I'm totally okay with that. We played a freshman 29 minutes a game last year, and he was one of our best decision makers. But he was really intelligent.
Love the conceptual offense. I can't encourage coaches enough to dive deeper and watch a lot of that. I want to pivot a little bit just in terms of rebounding, because I know that's been a big part of your culture and your philosophy as well. So maybe just outline a little bit of the rebounding philosophy.
Yeah, and we're always attacking. We're attacking on offense. We're attacking on defense, ball pressure. And so then we're going to attack the rim as well. And we're trying to create a possession advantage. So the first part of possession advantage is a turnover margin. And so we're going to turn the ball over some because we play fast, but we want to create a plus advantage in the turnover margin. Well, we want to create that same advantage on the offense rebound margin. Everyone talks about out rebounding teams. Sometimes rebounds can be skewed a different way. I care about how many offense rebounds we gave up versus how many we got and what our offense rebound percentage was, and theirs as well. And so when you win that offensive rebound margin and you win the turnover margin, you get more shots than the other team, you're probably going to win the game. So even like Virginia and Wisconsin, when they play slower, they don't give up offensive rebounds and then they don't turn the ball over. So they're creating that same margin with less possessions. And so we're going to have a higher possession game, 74-75 a game. And we've got to be able to create those margins so that we get more shots than the other team.
What are you doing in practice to work on creating those margins?
Every drill, I have a rebounding coordinator on staff, Dan Bailey. He's phenomenal. This is his 3rd year with us. And the second day I got the job, I called him and offered him a job. And he just finished playing pro, and so fortunate to have Dan on staff because he's a great player at Queens, not even for Coach Lundy and I, but he's for the staff before us. But his job, he charts rebounding every single play, okay? And then his job, every single drill, is to get a rebounding emphasis on it. So even those 3-man drills, when we're working on pistol and a guy takes a shot, we got guys getting opposite to create spots where we want to try an offensive rebound. And our guys know, they hear opposite all the time, all practice. And that just means when the shot's taken, we're trying to get opposite the drill, opposite the ball, because that's where a lot of the rebounds will go. So that's first. His job in film, he often goes first in film. He's cutting up the rebounding portion, showing the missed box outs, showing where guys are not going to go get the ball. And we have guys that are designated. There's two types of designations. You're a go get or you're a get back. And you got to do your job. And that's what we try and get to our guys. So he actually grades out every scrimmage and every game, every single shot taken, did a guy do his job? Offensively, did you go get or get back, depending on who you are? And defensively, did you box out and then pursue the ball? That first year when we were one of the smallest teams in America, I think we were top 100 in rebounding. And I think in the 2 years we're Division I, when we out-rebound our opponent, we won 94% of our games. Rebounding is hugely important. Again, it creates that margins or separation that you need to win consistently. And so I highly recommend having a rebounding coordinator. He owns it. He's really good at it, and fortunate that we emphasize it. And Coach Lundy's the one who really showed me how to do some of this stuff.
Yeah, very cool. And with rebounding, you reference defensive rebounding, you reference box outs. What are we teaching in box outs nowadays? Has anything changed in terms of how we teach box outs?
Yeah, I always say it depends on where you are on the floor. Okay, so if a guy's at the 3-point line and you're where you're supposed to be in help, the biggest thing is you got to take up space. So there's like a fight for space. Say there's 12 feet between you and the offensive player. You got to win more than 6 feet of it. At that point, you're probably not going to do a traditional hit, reverse pivot, box out. You just got to control him and then go find the ball. If you're in the interior, then you might have a more traditional hit, reverse pivot, drive out situation, because that's what that position dictates. And then if you're a guard and you got switched onto a big, it is just 9-1-1. Don't let them get the ball. And again, different for different situations and where you're at on the floor. And I think that's important to understand. Like, it's not always going to be cookie cutter the same, but the most important is the effort portion. If they put in the effort, you're most likely going to be successful. Maybe not every time and every play, but more times than not.
So you painted a picture of pace, of obviously aggression on defense and on rebounding. I want to paint a picture a little bit for coaches too, that this is not chaotic. This is not that type of thing. That there are times, especially if we're talking about offense, where the game slows down a little bit for them to be able to make decisions and make reads. So can you paint that picture a little bit deeper for coaches?
Yeah, and I think the best teams, they play fast in periods of the game, but there's also moments of the game where they can get sides of the floor and ice out a clock. You got to lead, you're up 10 with 3 minutes to go. Can you then manipulate sides of the floor before you get into your concepts? And then dead balls, can you execute? Can you take advantage of things you've seen defensively that get you in spots on the floor and how to get to those concepts? For instance, if they're switching pistol, totally okay. Getting to the empty ball screen, slipping out of it, and then having that big make the read on the help coming over. And so those are things that you want to talk to your team about in the timeout. We're going to get into this action. This is how we think they're going to guard it. This is probably the reads we're going to have to make, and this is where we're going to move on the backside. And that's where players got to believe. Our leading scorer the last year, AJ McKee, phenomenal player. We didn't run a ton of stuff for him. He got everything on the backside of concepts. So he was oftentimes on the opposite side, because his best stuff was when he was reading the defense on the back, not when he was in the action. But he was really good at that. And he scored almost 19 a game last year. It definitely probably seems chaotic. And when you practice at a pace, it could seem chaotic at first, but there has to be structure within that chaos. And probably the biggest thing you're going to teach your players is to just make the simple play. Okay? There's two guys guarding you, just pass to the person open. You don't have to throw one-hand passes everywhere. Not saying they don't have their need or space, but just make the easy one. Take the less risky play out. The team in a 75 possession game, the team that makes 55 to 60 easy plays is the team that wins. And out of that comes a highlight lob or a play like a special play that happens, but just make the easy ones, hit the singles, and don't worry about the home runs.
Love it. Paints that picture of kind of that in-depth understanding of what is an advantage, how to leverage that advantage. And if we don't have one, let's create one. So you reference not calling stuff, but you highlight certain things that they can look at or go to based on how the defense is coverage. Are there times you will attack specific matchups?
Yeah, yeah, but again, that will be almost always dead ball. So again, ball's knocked out of bounds, length of the floor after timeout. Then we can go at matchups, and that's something where our offensive scouting portion, we have an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and a rebounding coordinator. Our offensive coordinator, he will put together a package with me before every game where we'll have things that we think that they're going to guard us a certain way. These are the concepts that we're going to teach our guys to get to in randomness, and we'll work on those before the game. But then we'll also have this package of execution that we'll work on for timeouts based on out of bounds, where we'll go at matchups or advantages that we see.
Take us into a film session. You referenced having these different types of rebounding, offense, defensive, these different types of coaches involved in those specific areas. So take us in a film session. What does that look like? Does every coach get to participate in that film session, et cetera, et cetera?
I'll meet as a group with the coaching staff, and we'll talk about some things before we show our players in film. But then I'll meet with each coordinator individually and go over their areas. And all right, this is what I saw. How do you think they're going to guard these actions? What have they shown ball screen coverage wise, so that we can teach the concepts that lead up to that we want, but then attack what we perceive their weaknesses to be.
So conceptual offense, conceptual defense, conceptual rebounding, to a certain extent, a very conceptual program. What is one of the biggest challenges for newcomers in your program in terms of embracing this type of approach? I'm imagining they enjoy it, but initially there's got to be some challenges for them.
Yeah, I want to reference one of my close friends, Andy Broncom at Ferris State. He comes down every so often. We coach the TBT together, which is where I really developed a lot of this. Some of this is from Bart, by the way, and then some of it I've taken it in my own direction. But Andy says the hardest thing for a new player as he watches them come in our program is they're drowning in choices, okay? And that can paralyze a player, drowning in choices. And so we have a freshman big man here who I think's super talented, and he has the ability to pick and pop, but he was often hesitating, didn't know when to pop, when to roll. So what I've done is taken away his ability to pop for now, okay? And I want to get him putting pressure on the rim because he's very athletic and he's 6'10", and because I thought he was drowning in choices and it was paralyzing him in situations that made him ineffective. And we'll build from there. And once he gets really understanding of our concepts, he's rolling, he's putting pressure on the rim, his jump shot will come along, and then he'll be able to read the defense better and not hesitate. Because the hesitating and not knowing where you're going is the worst thing that can happen.
Yeah, it makes sense. And it's, again, not every player needs to have all the choices anyways, but particularly when it's early in learning, that type of thing can help them just get the basic understanding of the whole thing. And is there an example on defense per se that's similar in terms of they're drowning in choices because it's a little bit conceptual, and then you help them filter it so that they just focus on the right thing initially?
Yeah, our ball screen coverages are conceptual, and sometimes new players can really oh my God, I'm not sure what coverage we're in. And so that's really hard for them because it's glaring when you make a mistake on a ball screen and you give up a rim run, right? So that's probably the hardest thing to get, is to really try and whittle down their choices. This is where we want to be in these areas. This is where the direction we want to send the ball. And then them believing, whether you're not the most athletic guy or not, that ball pressure leads to all good things, okay? And then allows them to be able to block and push into ball screens, which sends it one way, which again cuts down on a lot of mistakes. The two things that they struggle with is the ball screen coverage and the ball pressure, because they don't always trust that they're not going to get beat. I'm like, it's okay to get beat every now and then, but you have to pressure the ball because we can't just let teams execute anything they want. And so those things are the things we're really trying to get to, is the ball pressure, and then just understanding what coverage we're trying to be in what part of the floor.
It just strikes me that you create psychological safety for those players in the sense that you can't have it both ways. You can't say, hey, pressure the crap out of the ball, but then never get beat, because it's going to happen at some point.
Yeah, good players are going to get beat. And my thing is the effort to get back, to fight back, okay? You're going to get beat when we're pressuring the ball at 94 feet and we're zigzagging. We teach this thing called turn and run. That's okay. But just don't get beat in a straight line and give up. And then sometimes the guy's going to help you, and then you got to get You got to get out and peel off and get back into the coverage somewhere and help your teammates stop the bleeding.
Coach, I know Bart Lundy's program did it. I know it comes from Buzz Williams originally. Take us into boot camp and give us a refresher. What's boot camp? And I know you said it starts Monday, so
Yeah.
let's go with boot camp.
It's preseason and it's designed to get our guys in excellent shape, but it's also designed to build our team chemistry and to put them through difficult situations, which usually right now involve running and conditioning and defensive stations, but to have them learn how to talk to each other and get through those, the adversity that they're gonna have during those, and all the cracks come out. And you don't have to yell and scream, and it doesn't have to be crazy hard. The players will determine how hard it becomes by how fast they get through stuff and how much they talk to each other. It starts at the first one's at 6 a.m. NCAA doesn't let you do anything before 5 a.m. So the last one's 5:04 a.m. and it's eight sessions. But it really, what it does is it builds our team and the way we talk to each other afterwards, how they communicate, and what they're ready to go through together is so much different. And Coach Lundy did an unbelievable job of building team through it. And again, it is nothing that like puts our players in a bad place. In fact, most of them love it. I'm not saying they love it when they're doing it, but they love it because they know how important it is. And we do condition for 3 weeks prior to that to get them ready for boot camp. And so we're in that phase right now, but it gets them going to bed early, going to sleep on time, because college kids often have their clocks flipped. And then it also gets them eating breakfast at that third meal, which helps them maintain weight during this conditioning session. But it's been such a blessing for our program.
It's just awesome. We used to say shared suffering makes a team, and I've changed it. Shared challenges make a team. And again, you just feel such a sense of accomplishment from doing something hard, not from doing something easy. So it's such a cool thing. And I don't know if I'll be there watching if I was nearby to watch it at that time, but it'd be fun to see in some context. So awesome. And this fits into the whole ethos of your program, Coach. Player forward. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I mean, I really just believe, and Coach Lundy was a huge proponent of this. I saw it firsthand from him. We serve the players, and our school motto is not to be served, but to serve. And the most important thing is our staff is here for our guys. We really believe in development, and our goal as a program is to get each player in our program better daily, and then as a group to get better daily. And we do that by serving them. It could be in anything. It's not just in basketball, but helping them through life, be better citizens in this community, and then be better students, and preparing them for their next phase in life, which hopefully for some of them is to be a professional basketball player. Been very fortunate to have 33 of them in the last 11 years from Queens, but also whether they choose to not go down that path and they take a job in sales or as doctors or lawyers, then that they're ready to be successful in that phase and also be successful family men and just, be positive in the society. We're a very player forward program. It's about them. I've had a lot of people ask the last few years, how do you feel about NIL or transfer portal? I'm all about them getting what they want out of the experience. It's our job to adjust, and I really believe that. And I think our players feel it every day, and I make sure that our staff understands that's what we're here for.
You've already got an incredible start to your head coaching career, and it's wonderful to be able to watch and wonderful to be able to communicate with you. So thank you so much for sharing with us, Coach.
Yeah, thank you for having us. And if anyone has questions about our program, please, social media, everyone knows how to find you nowadays, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, X, or Twitter, whatever it is now, TikTok, email. Hit me up, please. And if you have questions, I'd love to answer them.